Good gaming, everyone. I'll try not to hold you for too long. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll get you in and out of here faster than you can say.
Free. What Nintendo?
First, I have to start with a trigger warning. If you have a severe case of nostalgia, you might have an episode, so get your EpiPens ready as we discuss why 2023 is the best year in gaming ever. When I was a young lad, I got my first console in 1988. Yeah, 1988, 1989, around that time. I was gaming on the Atari and then the Nintendo, then followed by the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. All that time while we enjoyed those games, we imagined the future where games look like real life or the movies we watched. We talked about the future of gaming all the time and said silly things like one day we'll be able to step in the game and play as ourselves. Silly kids. And really, I think that desire came from wanting immersion and the viewer's need to suspend disbelief while viewing entertainment. For example, all throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, there were always major rumors about professional wrestling being fake. And even though in the back of our minds we knew these rumors were true, we still treated wrestling as if it was a sport. We had emotional attachments to our favorite wrestlers. They were like our favorite athletes or teams. We would have actual arguments on the playground about which wrestlers were better, as if that factor wasn't decided by a script and some team of writers. I say all this to set the table for my opinion in this video, and to say a lot of the games you grew up loving haven't aged really well. Some due to advancements in gameplay design, some due to controls, some due to visuals. I think if we were to be honest, especially many of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s, and now have children around the age where they can game coherently, being honest, when you try to get your child to try some of the games you loved growing up, you can see the look of disgust on their faces. An expression showing that playing this game is almost a chore. I've heard so many YouTubers and Twitter gamers talk about trying to introduce their sons to games like Resident Evil, turn based games, and even recently GoldenEye 007. Games we thought were cutting edge at the time has aged like VHS cassette tapes. Just know that I'm taking this into consideration when I call 2023, let's be fair, possibly the greatest year in video games history. Firstly, I cannot recall a time when there were three successful console manufacturers at one time. Can you? The closest instance to that reality was the mid to late 90s when PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and Sega Saturn were out. What we later came to find out was Sega Saturn was a complete failure. The Nintendo 64 was completely outclassed by the PlayStation 1, followed by the Dreamcast, which would become Sega's last flagship home console. And even with PlayStation outclassing the competition, one thing differentiated PlayStation from the previous great console makers, and that was that they weren't yet known as a great game development company. So while Sega was giving you Sonic, Streets of Rage, and Virtua Fighter, Nintendo was giving you Mario, Zelda, and Mario Kart. PlayStation was relying on third and second party developers for games like Final Fantasy VII, Metal Gear Solid, and Grand Theft Auto. And while Sony did have great exclusives like Twisted Metal, Gran Turismo, and Colony Wars, they didn't yet have their own stable of talent. But now Sony has household names like Insomniac, Bungie, and Naughty Dog. Nintendo is Nintendo, and Microsoft seems to be transforming the poor reputation they've earned by buying studios like In Exile, Mojang, and most of all, ZeniMax Bethesda. And all these moves seems to be bearing fruit simultaneously in 2023. For the first time since the mid-life cycle of the Xbox 360, we can legitimately say the Xbox is close to equally dividing the gamer mindshare with Nintendo and PlayStation. But more importantly, for the first time, we have three consoles, each with flagship titles, with Starfield's ambitious game design, Zelda's imaginative gameplay, and Final Fantasy XVI's in-depth storytelling. And what Final Fantasy XVI lacks in ambition or imagination, comparatively, it makes up for with tight controls and amazing combat design. With the showcase of Starfield and the critical success of Hi-Fi Rush and Final Fantasy XVI, we can legitimately say all three console manufacturers might have exclusive Game of the Year contenders. And that's what makes 2023 possibly the best year in gaming history. Combined with huge third-party releases like Hogwarts Legacy, Street Fighter 6, Diablo 4, for the first time in a long time, everyone is having a great year of gaming. Think about this. 3 of the top games this year are VR games, with Pistol Whip, Moss Book 2, and Walkabout Minigo. And we're only halfway through the year. For the rest of the year, we have Armored Core 6, Hollow Knight Silksong, Pikmin, the aforementioned Starfield, Alan Wake 2, Hades 2, Forza Motorsport, Spider-Man 2, etc. At any time, you could speak to any gamer and they could run off 10 games they're excited for in 2023. And that's just software. There's also compelling hardware, starting with the most recent, the Asus ROG Ally, a handheld that supports all your PC game launchers, pretty much for the first time giving you access to all the games you want to play on the go at a reasonably affordable price. Then later this year, Meta will be releasing its Meta Quest 3 VR headset, granting you untethered VR gaming and AR gaming experiences. I reckon back to my childhood of imagining the ability to step in the game and play as myself and being disappointed by the Virtual Boy, which wasn't VR at all. There was no head tracking, no looking around the world, just a red tinted Game Boy with a goggle strap to it. That dream of a silly little boy is closer to reality than the jaded adult would have expected. And finally, the Project Q. Yes, I know what many of you are thinking. What is the point of this? But for all the tone deafness of the Jim Ryan era this device exemplifies, it does have one improvement over the competition, and that's ergonomics. And before you dismiss this as a meager factor, let me say this. I owned a Wii U, you didn't. And let me tell you, using the Wii U controller was like playing on an arcade cabinet with a D-pad. One of the most underrated innovations in gaming history was the controller grips introduced to us by the original PlayStation. And it seems they're innovating on the handheld by introducing that same form factor, essentially a DualSense controller sawed in half with a screen in between. I know that description is usually used to ridicule the Cube, but it's actually its one shining advantage. One thing I've always wanted from a handheld was the comfortability of my home console controller on the go. without the cumbersome setup of trying to balance a screen on my lap while playing on a controller through Bluetooth. Now I get the comfortability of a handheld and the comfortability of a home console controller. It's almost a shame that they're wasting this on a remote play, maybe cloud gaming device.
Before I go, I initially wasn't going to add this for the lack of information we have on these games, but my case wouldn't be complete without mentioning Sony's serious return into putting effort in the multiplayer arena. For too long, their competitors were the go-to consoles for this genre. Foam Stars is getting great reviews, Helldivers 2 is a sequel to a beloved game, and Grand Blue Fantasy looks like it could be great fun for RPG lovers.
So, what do you think? Can you name a year better than 2023? And if so, why? Explain below. And I'm going to end it right there. I won't hold you any longer. And like I always say, take these companies to task, ask for better, never settle for trash. It's your man's Boycott, and I'm out.